female. She's sitting in the dining area. Female Hawaiian or simple 140, 5'5", medium build, wearing jeans.
Frederick, Colorado. To the untrained eye, it is just another quiet expanse of the American West, a place where the suburbs meet the oil fields, a place where people move to find affordable housing, safe streets, and a slice of the quiet life. At 20,825 Saratoga Trail stood a house that represented the pinnacle of that dream. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, over 4,000 square feet. Inside lived the Watts family. Shanann Watts, 34 years old, pregnant, vibrant, and relentlessly online. Chris Watts, 33 years old, quiet, fit, and by all accounts, the doting husband. Bella, age 4, Celeste, age 3, and Nico, the unborn son due in just a few months. If you looked at their social media, you didn't just see a family. You saw a brand. You saw the Watts, a story of triumph over health struggles, a story of financial success, a story of love. But social media is a highlight reel. It is a curated exhibit of the life we want people to see, not the life we are actually living.
How you doing? You seen your neighbors today? No? Okay.
On August 13, 2018, the reel stopped. The silence that descended on 2,825 Saratoga Trail wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was the silence of a tomb. In the next hour, we are going to dismantle the perfect family myth. We will examine the forensic timeline minute by minute. We will read the text messages that were never meant to be public. And we will try to answer the question that still haunts investigators today. How does a man go from planning a gender reveal party to annihilating his entire bloodline in a span of weeks? This is the case of Chris Watts. To understand the end, we have to go back to the beginning. The year is 2010. The setting is North Carolina. Shanann Ruchek was a woman who had already faced more battles than most do in a lifetime. She had been diagnosed with lupus, an autoimmune disease that attacked her system. It left her in pain, often tired, and wary of the future. She was a woman who had built a wall around herself for protection. Enter Chris Watts. At the time, he wasn't the fit, muscular man seen in the 2018 police tapes. He was heavier. He was shy. He was a mechanic who seemed content to fade into the background. When he sent Shanann a friend request on Facebook, she initially ignored it. In a later video, Shanann would describe their meeting with a chilling foreshadowing.
Well, one thing led to another, and he's the best thing that has ever happened to me. And because of my health challenges, because I got so sick, I let him in.
He saved me. It became the foundation of their relationship narrative. Chris was the rock. He was the one who stayed when things got hard. He was the good guy who didn't mind the hospital visits or the bad days. They married in 2012. It was a lavish affair. The photos show a couple deeply in love. But beneath the surface, the dynamic was already set. Shanann was the driver, the dominant personality, the organizer, the voice. Chris was the passenger, passive, agreeable, doing whatever he was told to keep the peace. In 2013, they made a massive decision. They packed up their lives in North Carolina and moved west to Colorado. They wanted a fresh start. They wanted the big house. And initially, they got it. Chris got a job with Anadarko Petroleum as an operator, earning a decent salary of around $60,000 a year. Shanann worked various jobs before finding her calling in direct sales. They bought the house on Saratoga Trail for nearly $400,000. It was a stretch, a massive stretch. And this is where the cracks began to form. not in their hearts, but in their bank accounts. The American dream costs money, a lot of it. By 2015, just 2 years after buying the dream house, the Watts family filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. They were drowning. They had $70,000 in unsecured debt, mostly from credit cards and student loans. The mortgage payments were suffocating. In the court filings, they listed their wedding rings as assets. They had to plead with the court to keep their house. They emerged from bankruptcy with a clean slate, but the habits hadn't changed. And then Shanann found Lavelle. Lavelle is a multi-level marketing company, or MLM, that sells a lifestyle product called Thrive. It involves wearing patches, drinking shakes, and recruiting others to do the same. For Shanann, this wasn't just a job, it was an identity. She rose through the ranks quickly. She was good at it. She was charismatic, relentless, and persuasive. Her phone became her office. She broadcasted their lives constantly because in an MLM, your life is the marketing material. You have to show that you are happy, healthy, and wealthy to recruit others.
And Nikki just hit 12K. She just earned her car bonus.
This created a dangerous dichotomy. On Facebook, they were on paid vacations, which were actually business trips. They were driving a luxury car, which was a lease paid for by the company only if she maintained high sales quotas. But behind the scenes, the pressure was mounting again. Chris was the silent partner in this. He wore the patches. He appeared in the videos. He smiled when the camera was pointed at him. But later, investigators would find he felt like a prop. And then something changed in Chris. Around late 2017 and early 2018, the shy, chubby mechanic began to transform. He started working out obsessively. He changed his diet. He lost weight. He gained muscle. To Shanann, this looked like her husband getting healthy. She praised him online. "Look at my hot husband," she would post. But psychologists often point to this kind of radical physical transformation as a sign of an internal shift. Chris was gaining confidence. He was getting attention from other women for the first time in his life. The passenger was getting ready to take the wheel, and he was about to steer the family off a cliff. It brings us to the summer of 2018. Shanann takes the girls to North Carolina for a 6-week trip to visit family. Chris stays behind in Colorado to work. 6 weeks alone. 6 weeks without the camera in his face. 6 weeks without the responsibilities of a father. It was during these 6 weeks that the perfect husband met someone else, and the clock began to tick down. While Shanann and the girls were in North Carolina visiting family, Chris Watts was back in Colorado, ostensibly working. But his days were not spent pining for his family. They were spent erasing them. In June, Chris had begun talking to a coworker at Anadarko Petroleum named Nichol Kessinger. What started as casual workplace chatter quickly accelerated into an intense physical and emotional affair. Chris didn't just cheat. He constructed an entirely new reality. He told Nichol that he was currently separated. He told her he was living in the basement of his house. He told her the divorce was nearly finalized. He presented himself not as a father of 2 with a third on the way, but as a man unburdened, ready for a fresh start. During those 6 weeks alone, Chris Watts lived the life of a bachelor. He went out to dinner, he went to car museums, he went camping with Nichol. For a man who had felt like a passenger in his own life for years, this new relationship gave him a sense of control and adoration he hadn't felt in a long time. Meanwhile, in North Carolina, Shanann felt the shift instantly. The texts from Chris became shorter. The "I love yous" disappeared. He stopped calling to say goodnight to the girls. Shanann, who was perceptive and highly attuned to her husband's moods, began texting her friends in panic. There is a specific photo from this time that haunts the case history. On August 4th, Chris finally flew to North Carolina to join his family for the last week of their trip. Shanann hoped his arrival would fix things. It didn't. One afternoon, Shanann sent Chris a photo of a doll covered in a sheet, lying on a couch, looking like a corpse. It was meant to be a dark joke about how exhausted she was. Chris didn't reply with concern or a joke. He didn't reply at all. His detachment was total. The family returned to Colorado on August 7th. The tension in the house was palpable, but Shanann, ever the worker, had a business trip scheduled for the weekend of August 10th in Scottsdale, Arizona. She didn't want to go, but she needed to maintain her status with Lavelle. She left Chris alone with the kids for the weekend. It was the last weekend of their lives. While Shanann was in Arizona attending conferences and trying to keep a brave face, Chris hired a babysitter for Bella and Celeste. He told the sitter he was going to a Rockies baseball game. He wasn't. He took Nichol Kessinger to a sports bar called the Lazy Dog. They ate salmon and drank beer. He paid with the joint debit card. This was a sloppy mistake. Shanann received a notification on her phone in Arizona, $60 at the Lazy Dog, when she confronted him via text, saying, "What did you buy?" Chris panicked. He lied, claiming he had bought salmon for a meal prep after the non-existent baseball game. Shanann didn't push it further. She was tired. She was pregnant. She just wanted to come home. On Sunday, August 12th, Shanann's flight home was delayed due to severe weather. She sat on the tarmac for hours. She texted Chris updates, but his responses were minimal. She finally landed in Denver well after midnight. Her friend and colleague Nichol Atkinson offered to drive her home to Frederick. The timeline of the murders begins precisely here, 1:48 a.m., August 13th, 2018. Nichol Atkinson's car pulls into the driveway. We see Shanann Watts get out. She is wearing a t-shirt and leggings. She is dragging a suitcase. She walks toward the front door. She pauses for a second, looking at her phone, then unlocks the door and steps inside. That is the last time Shanann Watts was ever seen alive. Inside the house, the security alarm system logs the front door opening at 1:48 a.m. It logs the door closing shortly after. The house goes silent. We know from later confessions what happened next. Chris was awake. He later claimed he was sleeping, but evidence suggests he was waiting. Shanann, exhausted and pregnant, went upstairs. She likely checked on Bella and Celeste, who were asleep in their rooms down the hall. She then entered the master bedroom. He was playing the role of the confused husband before anyone even knew they were missing. He arrived at work, met with colleagues, and acted normal. He talked about sports. He made jokes. He uncurled his lunch and ate it, but he had made a fatal error. He had underestimated the women in Shanann's life. He thought he had bought himself 24 hours to figure out his story. He didn't even get 12. By 9 a.m., Nichol Atkinson was texting Shanann, no reply. By 10 a.m., Nichol was calling, straight to voicemail. Nichol knew Shanann had a doctor's appointment that morning to hear the baby's heartbeat. When the doctor's office confirmed Shanann hadn't shown up, Nichol didn't wait. She didn't buy the "she's sleeping" excuse. She drove to the house. She rang the doorbell. She peered in the windows. And when she saw Shanann's shoes by the door, the only shoes she wore every day, she called the police. The clock had started. At 1:40 p.m. on August 13th, the first domino falls. Officer Coonrod of the Frederick Police Department arrives at the scene. He is met not by a hysterical husband, but by Nichol Atkinson, Shanann's friend. Watch Nichol. She is pacing. She is on the phone. She is frantic. She tells the officer she's not answering her phone and her car is in the garage.
Here, Nicole?
Yes.
Okay. What's going on?
So my friend We were out of town for a business trip this weekend.
Right.
And I dropped her off at 2 o'clock this morning. She's 15 weeks pregnant. She wasn't feeling well. And she had a doctor's appointment this morning at 9. And I told her to let me know if she needed me to take her. She's got 2 little girls. And she was very distraught over the weekend, wasn't eating normally or drinking. And we kept trying to force it on her because she's pregnant. Her husband and her supposedly are separating, but she didn't know this. She thought they were just having issues. He disclosed that to me today. Because I called him and I was like, have you talked or heard from Shanann since she left for work this morning? Because I can't get a hold of her. I've called, I've texted. Her car's in the garage. Her shoes she wears every single day are by the front door.
8 minutes later, Chris Watts arrives. He steps out of his work truck. This is our first look at him since the murders. Notice his pace. He walks toward the officer with a casual, almost sauntering gait. He doesn't run to the door. He doesn't shout Shanann's name. He shakes the officer's hand.
Yeah, get me on the phone.
Okay, get Matt on the phone.
Scott, how you doing?
How's it going?
How are you doing? A polite greeting to police while your pregnant wife and children are missing. Chris walks to the front door to unlock it. But here is a critical detail that prosecutors would later highlight. He spends nearly 60 seconds inside the house alone before letting the officer and Nichol inside. He claims he is turning off the alarm. In reality, investigators believe he was frantically checking for anything he might have left out: Shanann's phone, her purse, her ring. When they enter, the house is silent. Nichol Atkinson immediately notices things are wrong. Her purse is here. Her meds are here. Her phone is found between the cushions of the upstairs sofa.
This is her purse?
That's her purse. It's her medication. She takes these, her medication's still in here.
We're gonna get a hold of them. We're working on all that.
And then, the clincher. On the nightstand, beside the bed, lies Shanann's wedding ring. Chris tries to spin this immediately. He suggests to the officer that Shanann wanted a separation earlier that morning. He is planting the seed that she left voluntarily and took the kids to punish him, leaving the ring behind as a statement. But Nichol Atkinson isn't buying it. As the camera pans, you can see her looking at Chris with suspicion. She knows Shanann would never leave without her phone, her medicine, or her car seats. If Chris Watts thought he had successfully staged a runaway mom scenario, that illusion shattered at roughly 2:30 p.m. Next door lived Nate Tranastich. Nate had a high-tech surveillance system that pointed directly at the Watts driveway. He invited Chris and the police officer inside to view the footage from that morning. This is one of the most analyzing moments in true crime history. The footage shows Chris backing his truck up to the garage at 5:17 a.m. It shows him loading the truck. Crucially, it shows no one else leaving the house. No Shanann walking away. No other cars. Just Chris. But look at the right side of the screen. Look at Chris. He is swaying. He is physically vibrating with anxiety. He puts his hands on his head, a classic nonverbal sign of distress. He isn't watching the screen to see if his family is there. He is watching to see if he was caught. When Chris steps outside for a moment, Nate Tranastich turns to the officer and whispers the words that seal Chris's fate.
You just want to go talk to him? I'm going to get his info real quick. No.
He's never taken he's never rocking back and forth, and if you look.
Nate knew in 5 minutes of watching Chris, the neighbor had deduced what Chris spent weeks trying to hide. The facade was crumbling. By Tuesday, August 14th, the media had descended. Chris made a decision that many sociopaths make. He decided to go on TV. He believed he could charm the public just like he charmed his new girlfriend. He gave an interview to Denver 7 News on his front porch.
Chris Watts. I just want them back. I just want them to come back. I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring them back.
Analyzing this interview, forensic psychologists point to a distinct lack of emotional effect. He talks about the house. He talks about the lights. He talks about himself. I want them back. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. He never speaks directly to Shanann. He never pleads, Shanann, please come home. He speaks about them in the past tense. Furthermore, notice his body language. He is smiling nervously. Some experts call this duping delight, the subconscious pleasure a liar feels when they think they are fooling someone. But he wasn't fooling anyone. He was terrifying them. While Chris was playing the grieving father on TV, someone else was watching, Nichol Kessinger. On Tuesday night, Nichol saw the news report. She saw the man she had been dating for weeks, the man who told her his divorce was almost final, standing on his porch, referring to Shanann as his wife. She realized she had been lied to. But she also realized something far darker. Nichol didn't buy it. On August 10th, she did something brave and crucial. She walked into the police station and told them everything. She handed over her phone. She handed over their texts. She told them about his lies regarding the divorce. This changed everything for the investigators. Up until this moment, Chris was a person of interest, but they lacked a concrete motive. Why would a mild-mannered man with no criminal history kill his family? Now, they had the answer. A new life. He didn't want a divorce, which is messy and expensive. He wanted a deletion. He wanted to preserve his assets and move on with Nichol as if his previous life never existed. While Chris was being interviewed by the FBI and CBI, technology was testifying against him. Chris drove a work truck equipped with a sophisticated GPS system monitored by Anadarko. It logged everything: speed, location, engine stops, even seatbelt usage. Police pulled the logs for August 13th. The GPS showed exactly where he went. He didn't just go to a job site. He drove to Cervi 319, a site that wasn't on his schedule for the day. It showed he stayed there for nearly an hour. Investigators flew a drone over Cervi 3219 based on the GPS data. The high-resolution camera picked up something out of place in the brown field. A fitted sheet. It was the sheet from the Watts master bed. The same pattern seen in Shanann's Facebook posts.
Everybody's just like, I don't know like why this happened or how this happened, but like, I hope that she's okay, type thing.
Mm-hmm.
This distinction is crucial. They needed him to feel helpful, not hunted. Watch the body language in the first hour. Agent Lee is maternal, soft-spoken. Agent Coder is the buddy. They talk about his diet, his weight loss, his relationship with his father. This is the Reed technique in actions, specifically the rapport-building phase. They are establishing a baseline of truth to see how he behaves when he isn't lying, so the lies will stand out later like a beacon. But notice what's missing. In a typical missing persons case, the husband is frantic. He is demanding updates. He is asking, where are they? Chris Watts does none of this. He talks about himself. He is oddly calm, compliant, and eager to please the very people who are hunting him. He thinks he is outsmarting them by being the nice guy. He doesn't realize that every word he speaks is tightening the noose. The turning point is the polygraph. Chris had agreed to take it, likely believing his own lies were so convincing he could beat the machine. Or perhaps, like many narcissists, he believed he could control his physiological responses. Agent Tammy Lee runs the test. It is standard procedure, but the pressure in that room is immense. She asks him a series of questions. Most are control questions. Is your name Chris? Are we in Colorado? Designed to measure his breathing, pulse, and sweat when he is telling the truth. Then, the relevant questions hit.
Did you physically cause Shanann's disappearance?
No.
Are you lying about the last time you saw Shanann?
No.
Do you know where Shanann is now?
No.
Chris answers no to all of them. To the untrained eye, he looks steady, but the data tells a different story. In polygraph scoring, a score around 0 indicates truthfulness. A score of -4 or lower is considered indicative of deception. When the results came back, Chris Watts didn't just fail. He scored a -18. It was a catastrophic failure. When Lee and Coder re-enter the room, the dynamic flips instantly. The rapport phase is over. Now begins the confrontation. Watch Agent Tammy Lee here. She doesn't scream. She doesn't flip the table. She speaks with a terrifying certainty.
You did not pass the polygraph test.
Okay.
Okay. So now we need to talk about what actually happened. And I feel like you're probably ready to do that.
I didn't lie to you on that polygraph, I promise.
Chris,
I know.
Chris, stop. It's time. Just stop for a minute. Take a deep breath.
By the evening of August 15th, the police had 1. The failed polygraph. 2. The neighbor's surveillance footage proving he was the only one to leave. 3. The mistress's testimony establishing motive. 4. The GPS data placing him at the disposal site. 5. The aerial footage of the bedsheet at the site. This is the moment the nice guy mask slips. He doesn't get angry. An innocent man accused of murdering his family would usually explode with outrage. Chris just creates a barrier. He crosses his arms. He looks down. He begins to stutter. The agents now employ a technique called minimization. They need a confession, but they know Chris is too cowardly to admit to being a cold-blooded monster. So they have to offer him a story where he is the victim of circumstance. They have to give him a reason for the murder that allows him to save face. This is the most critical moment of the entire investigation. Agent Lee floats a theory. She asks, "Did Shanann do something to the kids? Did you come home and find that she had hurt them, and you just snapped?" It's a lie. The agents don't believe this. They know he killed them all. But they are handing him a narrative where Shanann is the villain, and he is the grieving father who sought revenge. It is the only way his ego will allow him to speak. Chris asks for his father, Ronnie Watts, who is in the building. The agents allow it. They leave the room, knowing that Chris will confess to his dad what he can't say to the police. When Ronnie enters, Chris whispers the story the agents just fed him. He claims Shanann smothered the girls, and in a rage, he strangled her. It was a partial confession, a lie wrapped in a kernel of truth. He admitted to killing Shanann, but he was still trying to protect his image by blaming his dead wife for the murder of their children. It would take months for the full, horrific truth to finally come out, that the children were alive when they left the house that morning. But in this small interrogation room, the perfect father had finally admitted to being a killer.
Stand up for me. I'm going to have you face that wall over there. Okay, just face it. Lift up your hands. Okay, this is one. How you doing, face me? Okay, you don't have anything in here, right? Okay, nothing in your pockets. Okay, go ahead and face that other wall behind you. I'm just going to search you real quick. Search your legs. Really? Okay, turn around, face me. No earrings, necklaces, anything like that? Okay. Let's walk it this way. Straight. Go out that door to your left. Proceed.
On November 19, 2018, just 3 months after the murders, Chris Watts walked into a Weld County courtroom to learn his fate. There was no trial, no media circus of a defense. To the shock of the nation, Chris had pleaded guilty to all 9 counts against him, including the murders of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and unborn Nico. Why? To avoid the death penalty. But the most powerful moment of that day didn't come from the judge or the lawyers. It came from the family he destroyed. Chris Watts sat at the defense table, his legs shaking uncontrollably. He didn't look at the weeping family. He stared at the table, a coward to the very end. The judge sentenced him to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 84 years for tampering with the deceased body and unlawful termination of a pregnancy. The case was legally closed, but the truth was still buried. The world still believed the partial confession that Shanann had killed the kids and Chris had retaliated. That lie would stand for 3 more months. According to Chris's final, most reliable confession, given months later from a Wisconsin prison, he and Shanann had sex shortly after she got home. Afterward, as she tried to sleep, the final confrontation began. But this wasn't a fight. It was an ambush. Warning! The following details are based on the perpetrator's confession and forensic analysis. Sometime between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., Chris Watts straddled his wife as she lay in bed. He didn't use a weapon. He used his hands. Shanann, 15 weeks pregnant and exhausted, barely had time to fight back. The autopsy would later show no significant defensive wounds, suggesting she was taken completely by surprise. In a matter of minutes, the life of his wife and his unborn son Nico was extinguished. But the horror was only beginning. The noise of the struggle, or perhaps the spiritual energy of the house shifting, woke 4-year-old Bella. Chris stated that as he was wrapping Shanann's body in a sheet, the bedroom door creaked open. A small voice asked, "What is wrong with Mommy?" Instead of calling 911, instead of panicking, Chris Watts made a cold calculation. He told Bella that Mommy was sick and they needed to take her to the hospital. He loaded Shanann's body into the back seat of his work truck. He then went back inside. He woke up 3-year-old Celeste. He picked her up, bringing her blanket and a stuffed animal. He led both girls out to the truck. At 5:27 a.m., the surveillance camera captures Chris walking back and forth to the truck. He isn't running. He isn't frantic. He is loading his gas cans. He is loading his lunchbox. He is loading his family. The girls climbed into the back seat, sitting just inches away from their mother's body, believing they were going to get her help. At 5:46 a.m., Chris Watts pulls out of the driveway. The sun hasn't risen yet. The drive to the remote oil site, known as Cervi 319, took approximately 45 minutes. Imagine that drive. The silence in the cab, the girls in the back, perhaps dozing off, perhaps asking questions, the father driving them to their deaths. They arrived at the site just as the sky was beginning to lighten. Cervi 319 was a desolate patch of dirt with 2 large oil batteries and a few storage tanks. Chris unloaded Shanann's body first. He dragged her to a shallow depression in the ground nearby and buried her in a shallow grave. He then returned to the truck. Celeste was awake. He took her calm, favorite blanket and smothered her. He then picked up her small body and did the unthinkable. He dropped her into an oil tank through a hatch opening only 8 inches wide. He went back for Bella. She was old enough to understand. She had seen him take Celeste. According to Chris, her last words were, "Daddy, no." He ignored her pleas. He killed her and disposed of her in the second oil tank. By 6:45 a.m., it was done. He was alone. The drive back to civilization demonstrates the true psychopathy of Chris Watts. Most people, after committing such an atrocity, would be catatonic. Chris was planning his cover story. On the drive back, he texted Shanann's phone, the phone he knew was currently under the passenger seat of his truck. He was creating a digital trail of innocence.
My daddy is a hero.
The man she worshipped, the man she sang songs about, ended her life and forced her into an oil tank. When the agents asked him why he didn't stop, why he didn't save them during that long drive, he gave a chilling answer.
I don't know. It's like there was no one there to stop me. I just felt like I had to do it to be free.
How does a human being do this? Psychologists classify Chris Watts as a family annihilator. Unlike serial killers who hunt strangers, annihilators kill the extensions of themselves. For Chris, his family was not a group of individuals. They were props in the movie of his life. When the script changed, when he wanted to be the bachelor with the new girlfriend, the old props became clutter that needed to be removed. Expert analysis suggests a deep, covert narcissism. For years, he played the nice guy because it was the path of least resistance, but underneath, there was a simmering resentment. He blamed Shanann for his financial issues, for his lack of control, for his feeling of being trapped instead of a divorce, which would require confrontation, alimony, and custody battles. He chose elimination. He viewed the murder not as a tragedy, but as a solution to a problem. Today, the house on Saratoga Trail sits in a strange limbo. The oil tanks at Cervi 319 have been decommissioned and removed. Chris Watts sits in a cell in Wisconsin, where he reportedly keeps photos of his family on the wall, a final, twisted act of a man who still doesn't understand what love is. We shouldn't remember this case for the monster who committed it. We should remember the lives he stole. Shanann, who fought through lupus to build a life she was proud of. Bella, who was soft-spoken and sweet. Celeste, who was a firecracker of energy. The Chris Watts case serves as a terrifying reminder that sometimes the monsters aren't hiding under the bed. Sometimes they are sleeping right beside us. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more deep dive investigations like this, please subscribe and turn on notifications.